Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This regular meeting of the Township Council is being held in accordance with the schedule designated time, date, and place of this meeting. This meeting has been provided pursuant to the provisions of the Open Public Meeting Act. We're using electronic amplifying recording device in order to obtain a clear and audible record. And we request all those wishing to speak be recognized to state your name and address directly to the microphone. The recording device will be still utilized by a Township Clerk's office for the preparation of minutes and shall be official record of the Township Council meetings. Madam Clerk, roll call, please.
Mr. Hutchison?
He is out.
Ms. Grace? Here. Mr. Minniot?
Here.
Mrs. Stubbs?
Here.
Mrs. Winters? Here. Mrs. Strato? Here. Mr. Mercado?
Present.
Mr. Burlingame?
Here.
Mr. Cardis?
Here.
Mr. Lechner? Deputy Chief Nazzi?
Here.
Mr. Chavo?
Here. We'll now open up the public portion. This is for agenda items only. Anyone addressing council may speak one time. Once all those who have addressed council have had their turns, they can speak a second time. The first public portion is for 15 minutes, and each speaker is entitled to 3 minutes apiece. Does anyone like to speak during the public portion? Mr. Cruz.
Evening, Council. Paul Crew, Blackwood. We had discussed this, I guess, as part of the regular agenda the last meeting, but Resolution 305 with regard to the Defense Logistics Agency and procuring equipment from Department of Defense. There was an attachment online, and I was interested to get information on that. Specifically, there's one listed truck, tank, and I'm hoping tank in this instance means gas, other tank associated with a truck, and not what the DOD would consider a tank.
Deputy Chief Nazzi, is there anything you can shed any light on that, or you?
Yes, sir. That was simply, it was the manager that monitors that account, which I believe is New Jersey State, for possible options for the township to acquire. That's all the change was. But regarding the list, it doesn't mean we want to get anything listed there. Specifically.
Right. This gives you the opportunity to procure this equipment. Would that procurement have to go through council to actually procure that equipment, or does this resolution give the police department the ability to do so independently?
It allows them the opportunity to request and acquire pieces for their department.
Okay, so independently, the acquired piece would be independently. Okay. There were a couple others, the truck, armored, and the truck, bomb service, and the unmanned aircraft. Was interested in what, a little bit of detail as to what is under those categories.
Well, our agent's not even looking at that, so I couldn't even begin to tell you what possibly the options are there. At this time, it's not even considered by the agency.
Okay. I guess I would request, I feel uncomfortable the way things are worded here for the police to potentially have Department of Defense equipment of this nature to be used against the citizens of Gloucester Township. So I would ask that maybe going through this item list, certainly there are things on here that protect our police force, or that certainly make sense for our police force to have. I'm just uncertain if truck/tank is something that our police force needs in order to keep us safe. So maybe a review of these line items would be appropriate before giving them the green light to acquire these items. That would be my request.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else? Mr. Heinball? No. Mr. Heinball?
Good evening. Peter Heinbaugh, Morningstar Court. Before I start with my questions, I did want to, I sent a list of questions to Mr. Cardis and he responded, thank you. But they weren't agenda related, so I'll have a follow-up for that later. And I did send some questions to Mr. Lecter and he also responded, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carson. Mr. Leckman?
For the list of agenda items, resolutions 297 through 303, the property is the Nike base property, is that right? That lake, the estates at Lakeside, that's the Nike base land, right?
Yes.
So that resolution for drainage and street improvements, road improvements, also on the agenda. Is that related to that? Is that for improvements or drainage projects related to that?
Which resolution are you referring to?
I didn't write. I think it's 296. The lot number is close. Are those projects for work being done that's related?
Resolution to the deed of easement to the county for their drainage system.
So those are not related, or are those related to?
It's unrelated.
It's unrelated. It just
Unrelated.
happens to be in the same area. Okay.
First Colonial is putting up the security for that other project, and that different thing aspect.
Okay, and resolution 308. That's a huge number, 2.1 million that we're taking, that's overborrowed money that we're taking from the capital fund back into the current fund, I suppose. That's where that ends up. A surplus, basically. Is that 2.1 million is, and 1.65 of that is all overborrowed money in a single year, 2019. That's a fourth of the whole capital projects
Yeah, we are.
budget.
Mr. Carter?
Yeah, we are canceling capital. You are correct.
How do we overborrow so much? Yeah, I know.
We call it overborrowing.
Yeah.
I have a local finance notice, 20-11, May 4th, 2020. It's primarily covering COVID-19 overview of financial controls. They suggest in item 6 here, review all fully funded unspent bond ordinance line items, identify any remaining balances. Remaining balances may be canceled by governing or ordinances used to fund a debt service.
Yeah, I'm not questioning the following the regulation and all that kind of thing. I'm questioning why we borrowed $1.65 million more than we spent. There's costs associated with borrowing, and I don't need to answer these questions. Is there any opinion you have about $2.1 million being over borrowed? And there's costs associated with borrowing. So we're over borrowed $2.1 million, and now it's saying we didn't need to borrow that, even though there's costs, interest, commissions, things like that.
I agree with you that there was costs associated with borrowing. At the time, there was a different picture that was set forth as far as what our capital project was going to be, whether we move forward with that particular project or projects. In hindsight, we didn't, either we saved some money, we didn't move forward with a particular project, and now we're canceling that, Mr. Heinball.
So why are we? Can we manage our borrowing in a different way where we don't have to borrow that's too much. That's too much for money that we borrow and then don't even use, and just take back and put back in the absorb all the costs involved with borrowing and just take it back. It happens, and this isn't the first time this has happened. It seems to be happening. This is the pattern. It's not the exception. Can we change the way we borrow? Can we just borrow? Just throwing out an example. Can we borrow 80% of a project when we put one up there, and then if we need more, we can issue a note or something to cover the difference. And if we don't need it, we don't need it. We haven't overborrowed. I mean, is there some better
Mr. Carson,
method?
is that something that's possible? Then after Mr. Carson answers, your time's up. I'm sorry. Is that something that a municipality should put up 80% and then come back?
That was just an example.
No, an example. I'm asking him the
No.
question. Thank you.
Well, is there a better example? All right, so you shot down that example. There's not a better way to avoid.
I'm sorry, Mr. Heinbold. Let Mr. Carson continue.
Well, my time is up. Thank you.
I'm not even
All right.
familiar whether that's part of local bond law or not. I don't think it is, to be honest with you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else? Mr. Polidoro.
Good evening, Council. Ray Polidoro from the Historic Village of Ariel.
Good
I
evening.
hope everyone had a wonderful Christmas, and I wish you all Happy New Year.
Same to you.
Let me start by saying that, personally, I like all of you. We have fundamental differences, both politically and governmentally. There's sometimes that we look at things like this and what Mr. Heinbold was speaking of. And again, I want to remind you that I like you all, but some of you don't do a very good job. Some of you do a terrible job of what you do. And looking back at bringing, I'm always funny to you, aren't I? Anyhow, when we
I'm going to behave tonight. I'm going to give you your 3 minutes, and then we're going to go to the next speaker. Go ahead.
okay, good enough. And I'm glad that I entertained. We're going back to 2014 and bringing money about 15, 17, 18, 19. And as Mr. Heinbold indicated, it's a pattern. Now, when you estimate in business, you estimate to have the most accurate budget that you can because dollars count in the private industry. Government doesn't work like that. Government can ballpark things. The only problem is you're doing it with other people's money, not within the business, you're doing it with other people's money. This is taxpayer money. Whether you run up the credit card in borrowing, debt, note, whatever, it's our money. And being this far off in estimates in the private industry would get you terminated. Now, it's not to say that somebody needs to get fired, but sure as heck somebody needs to do their job better. I hate to get into this every other year thing, but it's horrible. It's really horrible. People can expect, I guess, what are we expecting? Another 10% in 2022 or higher, depending upon your borrowing. The other thing with borrowing is that every time you borrow, somebody gets a commission. And not only that, borrowing allows you to ignore the cap because it's debt service. I think somebody's either got to look at this or maybe we do a much better job or find somebody that can do the job better. And the only other thing I would like to say is the GEMS landfill solar project is coming about again. You tabled it and removed it.
Right.
And my question regarding what's different today that you didn't know that you now know. I trust that this township will be putting that solar project together, if it happens, with zero taxpayer dollars. And grants are taxpayer dollars. And I would allow you to, not allow you, but
Again, the solar project is independent. It's not a township putting up the solar panels. Township is renting the ground to the company, St. Clark. We approved St. Clark a few years back. It's taken them a long road to get through. So it's St. Clark's expense, it's St. Clark's approval. They have everything they need through DEP. They're paying the township rent. They're bearing all the costs of putting up those solar panels. The reason it was put off last time, because it came on quick, because they kept emphasizing they needed, it didn't go through my explanation, or Tom's explanation, or the administration, so we wanted it pulled off, so we had an opportunity to discuss it with them. We're not supporting their private profit-making, whatever this St. Clark does that makes dollars compared to the one they put forward. They put forward, said the township was a partnership with them. We are not in a partnership with them. To the public, and that's why we pulled it off. We reworded the resolution that I did, not them. So the resolution shows clearly we are just supporting their application because it's green energy, but it's all their project. It's not the township's project.
And that lease, the funds are not directly to the township and not the GEMS trust or anything?
No, that township is leasing it, the rental goes to the township.
Excellent. And then we obviously don't have a issue with Swamp Pink anymore?
I would imagine that's one of the things that held them up, but that's all been resolved with DEP and Sincarfa. That's with all their undertaking, all their engineering and studies.
All right, I'd be interested in a follow-up as to how the Swamp Pink got resolved, if it's still on the endangered list.
We can have them provide us the information. That was not a township review. They dealt with the DEP to get all their approvals of where those panels are going to go and the impact of the landfill and protecting the landfill access and all those things was up to Sincarfa.
All right, because that was a huge issue when this project was first introduced back in 06, 07, and it stopped the project. I'd be interested in finding out. Was there a report that the township received from the DEP on the Swamp Pink?
I have not seen a report.
I don't recall sending it.
Any mention of Swamp Pink at all?
I don't recall.
If they have their
Current
approvals,
report or, well, for years there was.
yeah, if they have their
Swamp
approvals
Pink.
from DEP, that's all been resolved between them and DEP. Township was not in the loop spending engineering or doing any studies on that. That was their project.
Okay. Again, Happy New Year. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Mr. Polidor. With that, we close the first public portion. I'm sorry, Mr. Sweet, we reached 15 minutes. Next, we have a resolutions consent agenda. Any council member would like to have any item removed, please speak up. Hearing none, I entertain a motion to accept the consent agenda as presented.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Winter. Ms. Stubbs. On the question, roll call, please.
Ms. Grace? Yes. Mr. Mignon?
Yes.
Mrs. Stubbs? Yes. Mrs. Winters?
Yes.
Mrs. Strato? Yes. Mr. Mercado?
Yes.
Resolution 307, resolution of the Township Council of the Township of Gloucester, Cambridge County, State of New Jersey, in support of the Sincarfa Gems LLC application for the Gems Landfill, New Jersey pilot community solar application.
Mr. Farmer, thank you for that explanation. Once again, this is an application from the leaseholder, the individual that's leasing the property to apply for this pilot community solar application. Entertain a motion.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you. On the question, roll call, please.
Ms. Grace? Yes. Mr. Mignon?
Yes.
Mrs. Stubbs? Yes. Mrs. Winters?
Yes.
Mrs. Strato? Yes. Mr. Mercado?
Yes.
Resolution 308, resolution to cancel capital appropriation balance projects.
Entertain a motion.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you.
Second.
On the question, roll call, please.
Ms. Grace? Yes. Mr. Mignon?
Yes.
Mrs. Stubbs?
Yes.
Mrs. Winters?
Yes.
Mrs. Strato? Yes. Mr. Mercado?
Yes.
Resolution 309, resolution to make budget transfers between appropriations in the calendar year 2020 general fund budget.
May I have a motion? I'll make that motion.
Second.
On the question, roll call, please.
Ms. Grace? Yes. Mr. Mignon?
Yes.
Mrs. Stubbs? Yes. Mrs. Winters?
Yes.
Mrs. Strato? Yes. Mr. Mercado?
Yes.
Resolution 310, resolution of the Township Council of the Township of Gloucester accepting the 2019 audit of the Township of Gloucester.
Before I ask for a motion, all colleagues have, they should have, a copy of the report of the audit ended December 31st, 2019. And my first thing that I go to is I go to the back to see if there's any findings. And once again, there are no findings from our auditor. Thank you, Mr. Carter's and the CFO and the work that you do in your office. So we have a clean finding once again. I entertain a motion.
I'll make that motion.
On the question, roll call, please.
Ms. Grace? Yes. Mr. Mignon?
Yes.
Mrs. Stubbs? Yes. Mrs. Winters?
Yes.
Mrs. Strato? Yes. Mr. Mercado?
Yes. Mr. Cars will have this available on the website?
Yes.
I'm sure that'll be yes. Thank you. We have one GTE Gov access email from Joanne Carr, 50 Clement Drive, Summerdale. Just wanted to thank the Gloucester Township Police Department for the assistance given for the drive-by parade for my dad yesterday, John Welsh in Timber Birch, celebrating his 100th birthday. It was a spectacular parade with so many attendants. The police were needed for, with so many attendants, the police were needed for control and safety. I would also like to thank Officer Chuck Dockery for placing it on the GT Police media. As always, they were where they were needed. Thanks again, Joanne Carr. Thank you, Ms. Carr. We'll now open up the second public portion. This is a 30-minute time limit. Each speaker is entitled to 5 minutes. And I'll ask the speakers be cognizant of their time. There may be other folks that would like to speak. So please try to adhere to your 5 minutes. I'll open up the second public portion. Mr. Sweet.
Sam Street from Muriel.
Good evening, Sam.
Hopefully everybody had a good holiday season so far. What's the rent? Does council know what the rent is for the lease for
I
the
don't
gyms
have that off the top of my head, Mr.
But I think it's tapped at over 45,000 a year.
per year? Council, is there a reason why council didn't have that available before they voted?
I don't know what the lease is. They've been in the lease for a few years now. I don't have the dollar amount. I don't know. I know that we leased the property.
The lease goes back several years as a lease commitment, and then gave them time to go through the project. In fairness to the council, it might go back 3-4 years when we talked about the amount of dollars. So I would, if Tom looked at me and said how much, I'd have to pull out the lease agreement, not the recollection. But that lease agreement was signed many years ago, as they then started to go through the expense, because they didn't want to have expending the dollars if they thought the township was not leasing it, so they wanted the lease agreement first, so they knew there was a commitment. Then they spent tons of dollars to get their approvals from all the governmental agencies.
With these $2 million or 2.1, how does council feel about the over borrowing?
I answered earlier.
I wasn't here, so could you re-answer?
Oh, I agree with Mr. Heimball when he talks about there's an expense that takes place when you do borrow. I also indicated that there are times that there are projects that we put out on our capital projects list each year that at times we're not able to complete the project or move forward with the project, and at times we cancel it. That's what I stated earlier.
Okay,
Does anyone else want to add anything to that?
I want to point out again, local finance notice 2011, which came out on May 4th, 2020. State maximizing budget flexibility by accessing available revenues, streamlining budget appropriations. Section 6, review all fully funded unspent bond ordinance line items and identify any remaining balances that are not committed or under contract. Remaining balances may be canceled by governing body by resolution or ordinance and used to fund debt service.
Thank you.
I would imagine bids come in less too than when you work on your projects. When you fund them in advance, bids could come in less.
Well, the 2019, we decided we're not going to move forward with certain projects. And if you notice, 2020, we didn't do very much at all. We did what was absolutely necessary, which we were under contract for. And we did some computer upgrades so that we could bring up, I guess it's Microsoft, I forget the name of it, but it's Microsoft indicated they would not service what we had. I think we had 7 or something like that.
Windows 95?
Windows 7, they won't service anymore.
Yeah,
so you-
whatever it was, we did not service.
What-
It's like we're trying to make a joke. Yeah.
Hey.
Windows 95. Sorry.
We have shown we have the ability to borrow at a moment's notice if need be. So wouldn't it be prudent to put less on the capital budget or the capital projects and then borrow as needed if we needed more? Because if I go back through 18, 17, 16, we're going to see that there's more capital projects money that wasn't spent that's being added back in. So we're borrowing money, and as Mr. Carter said, we can use that money to pay down debt, but we borrowed the money in the first place. Then we're using the borrowed money to pay back borrowed money, which is a losing proposition if I were to take cash advance on my credit card and then use that to pay down my debt. So wouldn't it be more prudent to, instead of borrowing 5.7 million, borrowing 4 million for the capital projects, get a better estimate, and then turn around and say, oh, well, we need another $1 million, let's borrow $1 million, because we can. We can either do it through TAMs or however, else we can bond it, we can take a note out. Wouldn't that be more prudent?
In In that scenario, Mr. Cardis, as our business administrator, is that something that is feasible or the scenario that he presented?
You could do as many bond ordinances as you want. The issue is you want economies of scale. So what we do is we put together a complete project list, and each of the projects have estimated costs that engineers work on, that the police department gets the pricing on, that public works gets the pricing on. So we are pretty much right where we need to be in terms of the amounts we fund for the various improvements that are in the capital program. Sometimes there is money left over. Usually that is because of the roads. Prices come in a little bit better. I won't say anything with regard to the drainage because that's under New Jersey EIT, so you really only fund what it actually costs. For the most part, if we put stuff in public works, we buy it. In this particular instance, we just said we're not moving forward with anything that we haven't done, just as this local finance notice says, if you're not under contract, they're looking into saying for flexibility. And again, we don't know what we're getting in state aid next year. They're still uncertain. Nobody's guaranteed us any money yet. So it'd be interesting to see how things play out. This thing is not over, as you know.
Well, I realize it's not over. I'm just looking at going forward. It's been a history of over borrowing. I mean, I don't know the exact number for 18, but I'm sure if I went through all the council notes and agendas that there would be over borrowing from 18. I know there was over borrowing. We had an over borrowing from 14. One from, I believe, 12 a couple months ago at the beginning of all this mess. So I'm just saying, why wouldn't
Well,
we?
you call it over borrowing, I call it unspent money, is what it is. And
But
it's because pricing comes in lower than what we estimated. And to be fiscally responsible, we're estimating at the figure that our professionals are recommended that we should budget.
Okay, but
Money is left over, and I get it, you don't like that.
well, it's over borrowing because we're not. It's not like we're saying the job costs $2 million and we have $2 million here. Let's set it aside, and it comes in at 1.6.
There's a
We're borrowing $2 million. The job comes in at 1.6. It's over borrowing,
There's a
and
product
I think we
of
could
having money
do a
left
better
over.
job of that because, as he stated, part of the reason that our taxes went up 9.5% was $3.2 million of additional debt service that we borrowed. So I'm looking at different ways we could stop the borrowing or make less of it and borrow only when we need to, like a just-in-time system. And you guys always praise that you got excellent bond ratings and can go out and get money, and you got $10 million on TAMs, which we can go back and forth whether we need it or not, but you have that ability to borrow seemingly at a moment's notice, so why not borrow less and worry about it if we need it? Just my opinion. I'd like to see your council weigh in on that.
Thank you.
Is that the, by the way, the appropriations, the moving of the money?
Yes, transfer.
Yeah.
If there's time, if I have any questions, I'll come back up.
Yep.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else? Mr. Krug?
Evening again, council.
Good
May
evening.
I request to approach with some documentation so we
Sure.
can work off the same page? Evening again, council. Paul Krug. Hope everyone had a Merry Christmas. What you have in front of you is something I came across through an internet search with regard to New Jersey property taxes, put together by a website called Civic Parent, started by a woman, Bridget DeSouza, who's a CPA, MBA, and professor at St. Peter's. And on her spare time, she actually got into the New Jersey State tax records API and exported that into Tableau, which is a data visualization software. And you're able to go in and filter by year, by county, and by township, and visualize the annual county property tax, municipal property tax, and school property tax. And what you're looking at in front of you at the top is Gloucester Township as compared to Washington Township and Voorhees Township. Washington Township specifically, I thought was a good choice being right next door and having comparable variables. As you can see, to the left-hand side, you have the municipal tax base from 1998 to 2018. And on the right, you have those three annual property tax rates mapped. So some of you are politically savvy enough to know that there are many variables that contribute to all of these things. Why Gloucester Township versus Washington Township is interesting is because the equalized value of the tax base is relatively the same. In addition to, Gloucester Township is 23.3 square miles large. Washington Township is 21.55 square miles large. Gloucester Township is approximately 64,000 citizens. Washington Township is approximately 47,000 citizens. So comparable on a number of those variables where I think generally we can look at this and find value. What you notice is that the school property tax line, which is in the orange, nearly the same. And quite honestly, if you looked at most of the townships in South Jersey, you would see approximately a doubling, if not a doubling and a half. You'll also see that the county tax line, which is in blue or teal, are relatively the same as well. Significantly less increase, maybe a doubling, but probably a little bit less. But what you'll notice is that the red line, which is the municipal property tax rate, is significantly more substantially to the upside for Gloucester Township than it is for Washington Township or Voorhees Township. From 1998 to 2018, which this maps, we go from about $12 to $13 million in expenditures to nearly 50 million. I mean, that's a 5x in that time frame. Even if you went from when Mr. Mercado came on to council, I think, which was 2004, which was about 21 million to 2018, you're talking about a 2.5x. And the reason I wanted to show you this is because the last time we were together, I thought I had requested and maybe recommended that we start the budget subcommittee earlier this time around, setting the goal to actually drop municipal taxes for the citizens of Gloucester Township, because at this rate, I just don't think it's sustainable for my family and other families long term. It would appear to be a spending problem as opposed to a price goes up for goods and services problem, because 2.5 or 5x isn't the rate of inflation. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on the situation, and if the subcommittee can be put together earlier with the express goal of dropping municipal taxes.
Can I comment before you do that? Thanks for providing this, and we'll take a look at it. And thanks for walking us through it. With a subcommittee, normally we have our budget preparations that take place to the administration and Mr. Cardis, and that budget's presented to us. If it's in March or April of the year, calendar year. If there's an increase, we generally have a subcommittee that's appointed. We are not involved in developing that budget. Could I tell Mr. Cars, I'd like you to pay attention to this particular thing or that particular budget, that department? Where any council member could do that, but we're not intimately involved in putting a budget together. So a subcommittee is at the discretion of presiding officer of council. So if I happen to be president next year and I feel that there's a need to have a subcommittee, we'll have a subcommittee comprised of council members. So I want to be clear, council members. So we're not involved with putting the budget together. Mr. Cars?
So it looks to me like what he's comparing is the amount of money we expend in each of these municipalities, which vary very, very differently in terms of size, in terms of growth, in terms of needs. And I don't look at them as comparatively as you look at them. And I'd be more interested in looking at tax rates rather than looking at what total expenses are. I do know that in the abstract of ratables that came out for 2020, and if I'm off by maybe one number, but we have locally, just Gloucester Township, our portion, which is about 27%, we are the 17th lowest out of 37 municipalities. The overall tax rate, if I'm not mistaken, and I'll verify these numbers from the abstract of ratables, we're the 19th lowest overall. So I think that's pretty good compared to 37 municipalities. Would I like to be the 29th or the 30th? Certainly. But I don't see much in this. I'm sorry, Paul.
Yeah, and I knew that quite honestly, I knew that would be a rebuttal, and I hesitated to compare us to other townships because of the number of variables. So if you wanted, you could cross those out. It doesn't change the fact that from 1998 to 2018, there was a 5x increase in municipal taxes levied against the citizens of this township. So we can look at just the 1 point. It's a 5x. That to me is a spending problem, not costs of goods and services have simply gone up. And I think it's something, the reason President Mercado, I had brought this up is because at the workshop you had mentioned reorganization, and I thought potentially a good part of that reorg could be a subcommittee, at your discretion with council members to really comb these numbers and try to turn the tide on this upside, have this start to plateau or even decrease a bit. We can change the trajectory of this red line undoubtedly. So I would appreciate your assistance with that and would request that if you can, you help with that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Merry Christmas. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Is there anyone else? Mr. Heimbaugh.
Peter Heimbaugh, Morningstar Court. I did, Mr. Carlins, have a follow-up to the responses you gave me on my questions. You mentioned a $458,000 revenue item for something you identified as senior and vets. That was all that's identified. What is?
I did not. The CFO.
What is seniors and vets?
The CFO responded to your request, and I forwarded you her responses.
Okay. So what is $458,000 of revenue called seniors and vets?
I don't know what she gave you. I don't have it present, so. But I did not discuss that with her tonight.
Mr. Heimbaugh, can you share with us what the question was?
There was the books. The books say the books of Gloucester Township, the accounts say we received about $5.5 million in state aid revenue, that energy receipts tax. We were expected to receive about 5.1 million only. So I asked what made up this higher number, and the response I got was we made a mistake on the entry into the books. Really, we only received the 5.1. The township only received 5.1 in energy receipts tax grants. that this $458,000 of the balance of the revenue was misclassified. It was really for senior and vets. That's the only description
So
that's
what you're
given.
saying is she missed.
No, I want to know what seniors and vets is. I don't care. Mistakes happen. I'm not talking about mistakes. I was just asking what seniors and vets is.
Pete, I just want to know what your question is.
Yes, what is seniors and vets revenue?
Sounds to me like it's the deductions that they receive, the seniors and veterans receive on their property taxes. But I don't know how that relates to a revenue line. I have to talk to her about that. But it
Well, that's why I
sounds
said
to
any
me,
questions in
the bottom line is that she misclassified it, and when she
No, that's fine.
reclassified it, it came out to the exact number of the energy receipts.
Yes, that's fine. So that was a good answer to that question. So my next question was, what is senior and vets revenue? And I'll ask that again via email tomorrow.
That's fine.
So Mr. Krug asked some good questions about a budget subcommittee and about expenditures and things like that. Reviewing a budget isn't just about reviewing a document. A township budget exemplifies the priorities of the township, the tax burden that you impose on the residents of the township. It's not a document. It's the priorities of the township. So, council, anybody shouldn't have to wait until April, whatever, when this document reaches you. You could start looking at expenditures anytime you want through a budget subcommittee or an expenditure committee. You could call it whatever you wanted. And in fact, you are making decisions as a council already on 2021. At the next meeting, you'll be approving the professional contracts, awarding the contracts. And one of the items you'll be awarding next meeting is about $90,000 for something called a media consultant. So right there, it sounds like something a budget subcommittee or whatever you want to call it could be looking at it and say is imposing $90,000 of taxes on a residence to pay something we call a media consultant, giving the township the benefit for that $90,000. That's just one example. A budget subcommittee, a council budget subcommittee doesn't have to wait for a budget document and shouldn't wait for a budget document. It's just review their priorities and their tax burden on the residents anytime at once, all year round if you want, but should start before the year turns, which is 4 days from now, and before you start voting on tens of $millions in expenditures, which you're going to do at the next meeting when you award these contracts. I mean, why wait till April to start when we're 4 months into the year? The budget subcommittee didn't meet till June 1st last year. That was worthless. There was even debate whether it met or not, and I don't care about that because a meeting on June 1st isn't worth anything for a year that started on January 1st. So please, I recommend that you council form a budget subcommittee at this time.
Again, Mr. Heimball, that would be at the discretion of the presiding officer of council.
Yes, I recommend it.
And if that presiding officer determines that there's a need for a subcommittee, it'll be, once again, comprised of council members.
Yes. And
I
I
just wanna be
recommend you do
clear.
that
Okay.
now instead of waiting until April or June or something.
And I
Thank you.
disagree with you that that subcommittee was worthless when they met on June 1st.
We're 6 months into the year, so
No,
affect-
that budget was delayed, and you're well
no,
aware.
but you can't impact
Okay.
what your priorities are for the calendar year, for the fiscal year, 6 months into that year. That's the issue. But thank you.
Thank you. Before we bring our next speaker up, Mr. Polidoro, you're going to be our last speaker because we're running out of time on our 30-minute session. Before you start, Mr. Polidoro, and when you came up here the first time, I said I'm going to give you 3 minutes and you speak.
It is a little difficult to understand you, I'm sorry.
The last time you came up here, I said, you started off that you liked us, but we're terrible at what we do. And then I had Mr. Heimball just calling us worthless of the process. Do you understand why, and I'm speaking for myself, there's a frustration with the 4 or 3 individuals that come up here and want to hurl insults at council. I got thick skin. I could care less what you say about me. Because you said stuff for the last 16 years about me. It does not matter. It does not matter at all. But no one talks to you that way. And no one talks to Pete that way. And no one talks to Sam that way. Okay? We had this discussion last time. I don't take shots at you. I don't call you names. I don't say you're worthless. I don't say you're terrible. Mr. Polidoro, if I came to your job and talked about the work that you do, and I know you're not a public employee, but maybe your night job, you know, you're like 0 for 16 for the last 16 years. I could talk about the work that you do and the organization you represent, because you're on a terrible losing streak. But I don't do that. So let's be respectful of each other. Again, we're trying to get through the meetings. We're trying to talk, have a discussion. There are people who have come to our workshop. Mr. Krug sat in on a workshop we had 2 months ago. And I think you found it very productive, the discussion that took place there. But there's no cameras there, so people don't want to show up to the workshops. So, Mr. Polidoro,
And before my
time is yours.
And before my time starts.
And I gave you a full 5 minutes. Go ahead.
All right, because I'm in the private industry. I provide service for people. And at the end of the day, I charge them a fair price. They agree to that price. And they also agree whether my work is satisfactory or not. The verbal back and forth you're referring to is let's maybe think about what you are doing to people like us. Maybe not you're not throwing verbal barbs, but I guess the financial hit that you're doing to us is painful enough that we speak. And I don't think that it's disrespectful to criticize the job that your government is doing, or the accountant is doing, or the mayor is doing. It's part of our responsibility to do that in a respectful way. Okay?
And it's not, Ray. And I could sit here and light you up every week, but I'm not going to do that. But how productive is that? You come to me with solutions. Come to me, you identify this problem, that problem. Come to me. You've been doing this for 16 years.
I can say that there were some very active and knowledgeable citizens that did come to you with a solution, and it didn't go very well. And they were invited to bring some solutions, and that didn't go very well. It kind of falls on deaf ears.
No, we asked them to be part of a team, and what did they do? Well, you could speak for yourself. What did you do?
Let me just say something. I hope that the new council people that have not been around all that long are understanding the direction I'm going with this.
And before you continue, because you do say some things, Ray, and others say things.
But while you're
May I
talking,
finish?
can she
I'm
stop
going to
the
give you
clock?
5 minutes. You had your 5 minutes.
Appreciate it.
You'll say things, and sometimes just let it go, because it's like, why engage? Why engage with you? And you'll say things that perhaps you stretch the truth, you embellish, you give your opinion. Every other meeting, Trenton stinks. We do a terrible job. You make your credit card analogies. You talk about, you make predictions. Predictions going to come out from the watchdog pretty soon to say we're going to have a 0 this year and then like a 12% next year. You make your predictions. It's like clockwork.
You guys are very good.
But that's clockwork, your predictions and the things you say. But yes, we can be respectful here. You can continue to lob your bombs at me, okay, or anyone here on council, but we're not going to treat you that way. That's not how we're going about doing things. Your time's yours. Sorry about that.
I think that I've got a very unique way of presenting what I do. I don't think that I've ever been disrespectful. I do use sarcasm. I do use humor, but I don't think I've ever disrespected any of you. Now, when I say that you do a lousy job, that's my opinion of the job you're doing, not a personal attack. Because your job is not you. It's a performance of what you are doing. So please keep that in mind when you look at each individual and how we approach and speak with you. Now, the point that I was making is, and it's very confusing when you're looking at local government. There's some new council people here that don't know all there is to know about being a council person. We all learn on the job. It's called a separation of powers. And I don't find a great separation of powers in this township. The mayor and his administrator will bring something down, and it's a 7-0 vote. It's almost always a 7-0 vote, with the exception of one time, one very admirable council person did not agree with you. And it was unprecedented that one of the council members did not like what was being presented, that they felt the pain of the people of this township, and it was understood. and we never
Tell me who
asked,
that was?
why? Excuse me?
Who was that animal pool council person?
I would like to think that you should know that.
No,
It was-
public.
It was a one-time thing. You had a unanimous vote on everything. There was only one time that someone disagreed with the vote and voted no in the past couple of years.
Okay.
And I'm sorry that you don't know that. Now, as I was hearing Mr. Carter's respond to Paul's, and Paul really phenomenal job, as the budget by the citizens was a phenomenal job. And again, Mr. Carter's is always welcome here. We have back and forth. I've got a great deal of respect for Mr. Carter's, even though I insulted his job performance earlier today. But what I heard Mr. Carter's respond was 11 times he said the word "I" and he used the word "we" once. He represents the administration. You represent the legislative body that when they send something down, you dissect it, you look at it, you take it apart and put it back together and find out what is best for us. The mayor's office, the administrator is making a suggestion, but it's never, ever really been debated here. It's not the subcommittee thing. And I don't believe Pete was being insulting when he said that it was useless. Putting a budget together in October and November, getting it just about finalized in December, before you spend the first dollar in January, is really how budgets go. And of course, there are other municipalities that'll go into February, maybe March. Not many years late as we are. Obviously, the last year was brutal, and nobody could beat you up for that. It is what it is. But it seems to be that, the criticism is in 2014, 16, 18, and 20, a round number was about a 10% tax increase. With the amount of money that was found in unused capital and is able to come out at very different times and at very convenient times, it almost looks like you guys have the chance of decreasing our property tax anywhere from 10 to 20% next year, which is always good. It works out for you in the odd number of years where it's a zero. But the amount of money that you guys find sometimes in unused capital from so many years ago, maybe you can drop it down, because we fully expect another 10% in 2022, right on time, as you guys do. So I guess our criticism is not of you personally. It's the job that you do. And you prove our point every even number year that you raise our taxes. It says you're either not doing a good job, you're terrible at it, or just somebody else needs to do that job. It's not a political statement. It's everybody pays those taxes. And the unfortunate part is our seniors don't have the ability to go out and have other earning potential when they're on a fixed income. And what is happening to them is they paid their mortgage off years ago, and they're paying more in property tax than they did when they had a mortgage. And if you only knew how many more people are seeking food assistance and going to the pantries in this township, or the things that they're doing in really, really tough times because they're putting more money out than they ever had, maybe, just maybe, a second and a third council person will say, you know what? I don't like what this administration handed down to us, and I think we can do better. But it doesn't look like a lot of effort. And when you do it so late and you've already got all that money spent, why not work on it in October, November? I know you just got done the other one, but pick up the pace. We did that in a transition year. The mayor was able to take us from a July to June, and we did that. We worked on two budgets. We had an interim budget. We had a calendar budget, and that worked out. I can't see why that is the case. And my last question is for Mr. Carlemere. My question to you at the last meeting was, so the administration wants to send all that information down at a set time, which begins the process late for the budget and how you work on the budget. My question to you was, can council demand of the administration that information be handed down in October, November, December, before the calendar year begins and the first dollar spent? And you were going to get back to me.
The statute directs when the executive side of the branch of the government has to submit its budget, correct, Tom?
That's correct.
There's a statutory time, and the council really can't interfere with the budget process. That's the executive side of the government, where this government is concerned. When they meet their statutory requirement, the executive branch of the government submits its budget to the governing body for review. That starts their process.
Can you tell me what that statutory, is there a definitive date?
I have. came out today, local finance 2020-28, December 28, 2020. Mayor Council Faulkner Act, Executive, Budget Transmission to Governing Body, revised date, February 26th.
Now, are they determining whether that is for a January to December budget or July?
This is a calendar year budget.
And February is acceptable?
That is correct, from the state of New Jersey.
Again, well, we keep following their guidelines, and what are we, first or second worst in the country? That's brutal.
Introduction of the budget is right now set at March 30th, and that very well could change.
Thank you, Mr. Polidori.
And may I say, Mr. Cardis, can we shine? Can we be better than them at any time? And the last thing I want to say to all of you, nothing personal. It's the job performance. I have no problem with any of you, and I never would attack and never have attacked any of you personal. The job you do, because you're your whole public office and you affect our tax dollars, it'll never be personal, and you've never heard me say anything personal against any of you. Thank you, and Happy New Year.
Thank you very much. With that, we'll close the public portion. Polling the directors.
Mr. Carlin.
I have nothing to report.
Mr. Cardis.
Happy New Year.
Mr. Lechner.
I have nothing to report, thank
Deputy Chief Menazes.
you. Nothing, thanks.
Mr. Gyro.
Happy to report.
Ms. Grace. Happy New Year. Mr.
Thank you all for coming, and let's hope 21 is better than 20. Thank you.
Mrs. Stark.
I'm hopeful that 21 is much better than 2020. Have a safe and happy New Year, everyone. Be safe.
Mrs. Winters.
I hope everyone had a wonderful Christmas and holidays and spent time with their family. Hopefully everyone will have a safe and happy and healthy New Year. My COVID spiel for this time, please be smart still. It's still out there. We're still experiencing a ton of cases in the area. The hospitals are full. I can tell you that personally, the hospitals are full. I did get my vaccine last Monday. I'm scheduled for January 11th for my second dose. If it's available, it's a personal choice. I got it as soon as I was able to. Please be safe.
Mrs. Strada.
Thank you and have a happy and safe New Year.
Mr. Mercado.
Mrs. Winters, may I ask you a question?
Sure.
So with the vaccinations, remember, Mr. Munoz can also try to help us too. How is that, how can the common resident, Joe resident, know that a vaccine's available to them? Or do you have?
It will be, I believe, and I'm not part of this, but I believe it will be introduced and advertised at that time when it comes out. The next step will be teachers, I believe police officers, and other high risk.
Because I saw the governor today at his news conference talked about how CVS is going to have a lot of, CVS and Walgreens are the two that
Well,
are
right now they're
administered.
just doing nursing homes and those employees.
But they also about CVS is having,
They will.
there'll be
They're thinking
centers.
probably April
Okay.
for open to the public.
Okay, and I think that maybe that's something that we work with our administration in trying to get that message out when it comes to the county health department, Dr. Nawago, the county health, but to have that information available to our residents. Because I did something online to take a look at where I would fall. I'm the 7th millionth person perhaps in the state of New Jersey to get it. And the 500,000 person in Camden County was like, okay, so,
Virtua
I'm
itself has
interested.
already vaccinated over 4,000 people
okay.
just through the Virtua organization.
I would tell you, I do appreciate your updates and when you talk about this. I was at the last council meeting, I was ill, and something that Mrs. Winters said resonated with me regarding Christmas Eve celebrations, like, you know, you want to see them next year,
Yep.
don't do it this year.
It was hard.
Same
but
thing, and so my comments will kind of echo with New Year's Eve. I'm seeing a lot of gatherings that over Christmas and people posting pictures with their families, and you know, I like everyone to be with their family again next year, and I think we should be cognizant about our interactions with folks and be safe and mask up. I want to wish everyone a wonderful New Year. Thanks for everyone who's come and participated in these meetings. Mr. Carter, Mr. Carter, the Deputy Chief Menazes, Nancy, Mr. Lechner, for the professionals, Mr. Chadwell for coming and providing all your advice and counsel at our meetings. I do appreciate your input throughout the year. We will have reorganization on January 4th at 6 o'clock. here in council chambers. We will not have a workshop. We have a new schedule with our workshop. The workshop will precede the first regular meeting of each month at 6:30. So with that, entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make that motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
You have a great evening.
Michelle, I need you to sign.
Happy New Year.
Yeah.
Uh,
You know, that, I took a dry turkey